Today I'm going to show you the new feature coming out in Case Journals version 2.6.01. Specifically, it has to deal with this tab here labeled External Files. Previously, we had a tab in its place. I'll just pull up an older picture. It used to be called Attachments, and it looked like what you see here. We've renamed that tab. It's now called External Files. In Case Journals, you have an External Files on the client information, used to be called Attachments. As well, we have the same thing on the case information, and again, we've called it External Files, and it looks like that. We'll use the one today showing the client External Files. They function exactly the same between clients and cases, so showing you one will do a duty for the other one. Okay, so first we're going to start and show you how to add files to the External Files table here, and there's three different ways you can add files. First, you start by clicking on this Add File button, and then what you do is you would browse to a file that you'd like to add. So for argument's sake, I'm just going to pick this document here. It doesn't really matter what it was. Now, in the older versions, we used to do what was called a link to a file. We used different terminology, but essentially it's been replaced by this link to external file. Before you can add any file as an external file to a record, what you have to do is provide a description of what that file is about. So I'll just put this is a test file in here, but normally you would write the details of what it is. And when you select, you can either select link to external file, move to a repository non-SQL, or move to a repository SQL. Right now I'm going to choose the first one, which is link to external file, and I'm going to click on the add button. And when you do, you see that I have a line in here that shows me the file. Essentially, this file must exist at that path, and we'll talk more later about accessing that file. Let's do the same thing and add the other two different, so you can see the different ways to do it. For the sake of brevity, I'm just going to keep adding the exact same file again, although obviously normally you wouldn't be doing that, but I'll just type in here, this is a second test, and I'll move it to the non-SQL repository. And it does ask me if I want to delete the original file when you add it to a repository. Because now the contents of that file exist internally in Case Journals, you could delete this file and it would no longer exist on your system. So this is a good way to keep your system clean of extraneous files and keep the file stored in a single place inside the program when you're using repositories. In this case, I'm going to say no, but normally you might answer that yes. And I'm just going to add this one more time. I'm going to do the exact same file again. Although just for the sake of not repeating myself, normally you wouldn't add the same file 3 times. And I'll just show you, simply pick this. Now when you are adding to repositories, down here in the bottom, it's going to tell you a status of the repository, because there are limits to how much data can be stored inside of a repository file. And these two options will tell you, these two status windows will tell you at the bottom if you're close to using all that space up. Anyway, when I click on add here, and again I'm going to say don't delete that. So here's the way the 3 files appear. So links appear in yellow, repository non-SQL appear in green, and repository SQL appear in pink. Just a quick note, even if you're not running the SQL version of Case Journals, you can store documents in the repository SQL as well. It just means that the data won't be within SQL, but it gives you a second repository that you can access and use. All right, so now let's cover the topic of looking at those files. Obviously, if it's a link, you can click on this button and just open up the file here, and the links just show the file as long as that file actually exists in that location. The repositories are a little bit different. If you choose to look at this file, so that's this first column over here with the little circled arrow, that will retrieve the file for you. The repositories actually have to pull the file out and recreate a file on your disk. So they're both a little bit different than a link. And when you do, what happens, well, let's just do one here. You see, I have to give a reason why I'm accessing it. So I say, I want to print this document. And it also wants to know where you want to save that file to. So you can provide a location where you want that file to go. And you can put it there, and it will give a name. And as soon as we click on the Open button, it will create a new file in that location. And once it's retrieved it, it'll ask if I want to open it. So I'm just going to say yes here. And there's the file that we can open. Now, that's the same process for either a non-SQL or an SQL repository file. That's how you can retrieve and open that file. And it does create it on that disk at that time. Now I'm going to show how you can remove a file from the repository. Links are really simple to remove. You just click on this red X on the far right column of the table. I'm going to show you the removing from a repository is a little bit more involved in it, and so I'm just going to click on that X, that red X here now. And if I want to remove a file, what I have to do is I have to give a reason. So I'll just put duplicate file in record. Okay, and then I'm just going to click on the delete button here. So it tells me it's irreversible, but I say I still want to go ahead and do that. So I click yes. And you'll notice now it's removed off that list. Now, what you can do is you can always see any deleted files by clicking on this button here. You can no longer retrieve the file, but you can see that it was once there. Now, last part to show you is how you can look up information on these files. So this middle column of these three icons that appear on each line is an information bubble. And if you click on that information bubble here, you will see the description of the file and also its original location where it came from. The file may or may not exist there any longer, but you see the detail of it. Furthermore, what you can do is you can click on the history and you can see, for example, when it was added to a record or if it was ever retrieved. If I click on this row that says retrieved, it tells me the detail of who retrieved it and why they retrieved it, also the date and the time that they did that. So all that shows in the history of the file. For files such as this last one that have been deleted, if I go in here, again, I can go to the history tab and I can see who deleted it, why they deleted it, and what date and time that they deleted it from the record. Lastly, if you're talking about a link, we created it in the information bubble. We put an extra step because previously all of our we used to call them attachments, were in fact links. And if you have these links and you now want to move it and change it to a repository item, you can do that simply on here on the information bubble. This pops up and you can use this button that says move to repository. And if you do that, you see it's a pretty simple task. I can just choose where I want to move it to, either the non-SQL or the SQL. Move that up a little bit. I can choose the SQL and non-SQL, and when I click add file to record, it's now changed that. And when I close this, you see that now that's been changed to an SQL repository file and where it now resides. And again, if I go to my history, you'll see that it's moved to the repository on this date and time. Well, that's it for the new external files feature that you'll find in the software coming out in this next version, 2601. I hope that you found that the video informative, and of course, if you have any questions, just reach out and get in touch with us. I'd be happy to help you.